So some of you might be surprised you haven't seen a Leverbell yet or a mace when we're talking about rotation. And this is actually really important because a lot of people misunderstand what's happening with a lot of the more popular forms of Leverbell or mace work. I'm going to give you an example with the 360s. I've sort of touched on this before, but it's worth mentioning again. When you're going to see a motion like this, I'll show you a 360. That's an anti-rotational exercise. My body is resisting the movement of the weight. You didn't see my body move into rotation as I move the weight. So again, remember, we're always talking about what my body is doing, not the load. So again, big or subtle difference that makes a big difference in how we communicate and program. So could I use that as an anti-rotational exercise? I can. You just need to understand the difference between it being rotation and anti-rotation. What we're going to do with the ultimate sandbag is actually create rotation in a drill that looks kind of similar, but I'll point out some of the foundational differences. So again, the biggest one is that I'm using rotation to create the movement. I'm not resisting rotation. So I usually recommend smaller ultimate sandbags for this, so I have a power ultimate sandbag. Now there's two options to grab upon the handles. You can grab in a little closer to the neutral grips or a little wider on the outside grips. Why would I grab either one? Well, I can grab the outside grips for two reasons. One, if I want to have more control over the implement. So the way I can create more stability upon the ultimate sandbag is grabbing those outside handles. So if I don't want to go too fast, I want to have more control, so forth. If I find that my body size or my shoulder mobility is better off with a little bit of a wider grip, that's totally acceptable as well. So why would I go inside grip? Well, two reasons. Again, some people are a little bit smaller framed, so that fits people's dimensions a little bit better. Or you'll find that if I really want to go fast, as I use the smaller handles, it creates more swing with the bag, as I'll show you in a couple minutes. So you get a little bit more speed and projection of the weight. So the biggest thing before I bring the weight into the exercise, let's just talk about what's going to happen. So what's going to happen is I'm going to always start with my arms fully extended. Now, I'm going to have some tension to begin with because I want, again, the lats engaged. I'm going to pivot, and that pivot is going to allow the weight to start to transition to one side of my body. In this case, if I'm pivoting with my right foot, it's going to move towards my left. So as my pivot happens, my elbow is going to drive into my ribs. That's really important. If my elbows start to come away from my body, that's where I get into trouble with this exercise. So again, my elbows are going to go into my ribs, the top arm is going to come across, and I'm going to end up in the middle point with the weight touching right between my shoulder blades, and I actually want to stop at this point. This is really critical, and this is where a lot of people make a mistake in the movement. A lot of people miss this midpoint, and they start creating, I'll show you guys in a couple minutes, a helicopter effect that really negates a lot of the benefits of the exercise. All right? So again, a lot of people try to go too fast, too soon, and they miss a lot of good portions. And the reason that we want these outside of just better performance of the exercise is if I keep my elbows in close, I have a lift and I have a plank. All right? When I come back down, I'm going to come back down the same side first. I'm going to pivot, and then I'll have a chop coming back. Now, in communication to your clients, you can use a host of different analogies. I can be putting on my jacket and then taking off my jacket. Or we're in the age of superheroes, so if you like to put on your cape and then take off your cape, that's cool too. Whatever allows you to understand what we want. Now, the last point before I do the exercise is what's happening with this pivot leg. For whatever reason, I don't know if it's the load moving along the body, when people start to do this, they start to lock out this leg. Remember, both my knees want to be soft into the motion. Okay, so even here, I'm always soft in my legs. It's very hard to pivot correctly if I start to lock out my legs. So when I begin this, I'm going to grab the outside handle so you can see how I can slow it down. We want this to be slow and controlled before we move fast, right? We got to do it slow before we move fast. So when I'm doing this, again, initially with clients, this could be great movement prep. This could be part of their warm-up. This would be a great way to mobilize their hips, stabilize my core, and add mobility to my upper body. I can go slowly, do 5 or 6 reps each side, go to something else, come back to it. It's a great way to sort of build up that proficiency before we hammer in the exercise too much. So, grabbing those handles, I want a little tension first. I'm going to create that pivot. I allow the back to wrap. right up into my upper back. It's not upon my neck, it's right here. Now, right here is really important because, again, a lot of people lose their plank. They lose their plank by allowing their ribs to extend up. Now, when I start going fast and I allow that to happen, I become off balance, I lose the motion. To come back down, head stays stable, I pivot, elbow comes in, come down and around. Now, notice initially when I'm going slowly, I allow my head to sort of lead or follow the movement. Since your head, or your body follows your head, it's a good idea initially. As I go faster, you'll see that change a little bit, but initially it's good. So again, grabbing my feet, a little tension in the handles, elbows come in, wrapped on, wrapped off. I always come back down to here. Now, what some of your clients will see, or you'll see with your clients, is twofold. Grab a lighter weight here. So you'll see the elbows come away, and you'll get a kind of thump on the back. So you notice how I didn't fully pivot, I didn't, keep the elbow in close, and people will come back and they'll start from here. So they'll start with their elbows already flexed. So now I want to use my arms instead of using my hips. So that's why it's important to get people back into this position. So again, if you're seeing this, you see how I'm not fully pivoting. I'm just sort of doing a casual turn of my foot. And again, I don't want to start here. I always want to come back to this point. So again, slow people down. Allow them to get the exercise. So again, working one side at a time, super important. What I'll do is once I get proficiency, then I can start to make a circle. When I make a circle, I'm still not going to bypass that middle position, all right? So I really want to emphasize that middle position until I am ready for the element of speed. So if I go the other way this time, a little tension, come around, onto my upper back, come back down. I start to smooth it out a little bit, okay? But initially, I really want you guys to stop right here. Because so many times I see people doing this drill, and they're starting to go like this as they come around, and they've already lost their core stability. So the reason, or the way I'm able to keep my core stable is by how I use my feet. The more I press down into my feet, the more I'm able to keep my core engaged. Now I can start adding a little bit of speed. Now, that's all by my feet. I start slow, build up slightly. So now I won't stop in the middle, but I'm not going super fast either. I'm just getting ready to be more fluid with the exercise. All right? So again, you have to earn the right to go to the element of speed. A lot of people want to jump to the speed portion because they think it's cool, and they'll lose a lot of the quality of this exercise. Now we're going to have a little bit more movement of the weight. And like in the lunge progressions, we're going to have the suitcase position of the bag come around my body. So remember, as it's coming around, we're going to resist rotation and end up with a lot of frontal plane load. So I'm having to move into the sagittal plane as the load is actually dynamically moving through the other planes of motion. So again, kind of advanced. I'm going to use just the bag right now so you can see the motion. But as we talked about, that's not where we're going to start the exercise because what's the hardest part is we're going to need to apply some tension and some activation on this side of the body, all right, to balance you out. Because otherwise, people are going to want to almost fall over. So the way I would like to start this exercise is actually start across my body. Very similar to what we just talked about in our lift and chop series, it's going to be easier, all right? If I start on the other side trying to come around, it's going to be also logistically awkward. Now, when I'm in this position, I want to create that tension. I want to create that nice tight grip because you can see what happens to my shoulder. If I'm loose, it sort of hangs out. I feel like I have to lean forward to do it versus tight. Now it just automatically popped up. I'm a little bit more forward. Now I just want to clear my leg again. I'm not trying to be all the way to the side of my other hip. I just want to clear the knee. So being here, what's going to happen is as I create that tension, I drive up, is the bag going to rotate and finish in the suitcase position. Now what's going to be the challenge is it's going to have to come back as I drop down. And I want to try to have as slow of an eccentric as possible. So again, I'll show you tension, tight, drive to the top. As I come back down, grip, 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 and try to finish at the same time I land back onto the step. So in a moment, we'll just go relatively quickly, but not in a race, to show you how we actually use the different loading positions to give a little bit of that feedback. So the hardest version, just so you guys understand and make sure we're consistent, is not having any feedback upon that opposing side because I don't have a way to create tension. You can always use that strategy I learned many years ago in the kettlebell world, where you create a fist and you can try to create some tension, but not having the load there isn't quite the same. So this will be a great way to sort of integrate everything into your movement. So kettlebell in the rack position is where we're going to begin, not the suitcase, also because of logistical issues, right? But remember, when I have the weight higher up, I'm going to have more instant core tension. So again, this should be probably my initial loading position. And remember, I want to grip tightly, so it's going to be gripping tightly at both ends. So remember, I want my setup to be correct. Tension first in both handles, pushing through the top leg, creating some tension in the lower body. Drive, and finish that rotation almost at the same time I step. Same thing coming down, tension, grabbing with that top foot. I don't want to fall, I want to think about grabbing and try to finish almost right back. So again, try not to push off that down leg. Up, grabbing, coming down. Is this more advanced? Of course it is. But it's also giving you an idea of how we can start challenging more than just load or reps as we go through these different exercises. So in a minute, we'll take you to a solid different position, which will be just bringing the weight up on the shoulder in the form of our ultimate sandbag. All right, guys, what I'm going to show you is a bird dog progression with the lever bell. Now, a lot of you are going to say, can I do this with a dumbbell? Sure, by all means, you can do this with a dumbbell. The reason I'm using the lever bell is because of the leverage of it. I'm going to get a lot more grip stimulus and a little bit more instability out of the exercise. But don't get too fixated upon the equipment. It's one of those things over time, if you start to use them more, you start to see the greater value in using the right tool for the right job. I'm going to break this down in a sequence just because, again, once we start pulling the hand up, like we did show you with the dumbbell variation, it does change the dynamics quite a bit. So again, what I'm going to do is make sure I get my line up first. Always get your foundation stable. Now, I generally recommend really choking up initially because you're going to have the tilt of the lever bell playing with you in this case. And when you're doing so, you want to make sure to line up so that the lever bell is in line with your lower, where you're going to pull it to, so the lower part of your body. So when I set myself up, I got tension. Now I'm not going to move anything but my arm first. It's going to be a row in, turn, press out, pull, down, and back. Now you saw what I want to do is I want to shift back to compensate for the leverage the lever bell is creating. So it's actually kind of counterintuitive to keep yourself over the hand, pressing the balls of your feet as you come up, out, here. Pull, back, and down. That can be really challenging. And you can imagine now, when we start to add in the different variations, remember, with the bird dog, we have the slides, we have the static position, we have the bands, but I'm just going with the free leg. That lack of sort of tension and feedback is going to make this that much harder. So I'm going to try to time it simultaneously. So as I pull up, the leg starts to come up, rotate, and I extend right at the very end. Pull back in, come down, bring the bell back down. Let's do it one more time. Again, feet, hand, row, rotate, out, pull. As I pull the leg back in, I'm creating tension on the ground, and back down. A great challenge that bird dog to get a little bit more out of the movement, but to understand pressing the ground, that shoulder stability has to work with that kinetic chain to keep yourself balanced.